This video is something that I originally wanted to do like last week. Unfortunately, eBay and people who ship things through eBay did not get me my stuff when I wanted to actually do this. Here, let me show you what I mean. So I ordered 3 decks. I wanted to do a video where I would combine all of the face-up, face-down focused decks. Technically, there is a 4th one that has some face-up, face-down synergies, but we're not going to talk about that just this moment. And when I wanted to go ahead and make this video, I ordered all 3 of the face-up, face-down decks at once. I ordered the Deadly Disguise deck, the Jump Scare deck, and of course, I ordered the original Faceless Menace deck. But you notice how this was estimated to get here on Thursday, May 15th. And we are now sitting here, well, I'm recording on the 19th, and this video is probably going to be going up on the 20th. That video is not going to get made the way I wanted it to be. So we're going to have to make some substitutions to make this video work. Let's roll the intro and get done with the preamble. Let's get into this. So 2 of the decks did get in, and I wanted to go ahead and make a video with them regardless because they were here and available for me to build with. So what I did is I bought the 2 decks, got them together, and then got all the cards I was missing from the Kadena deck from my local game store. There were only a couple cards that were a little overpriced compared to what I'd like to pay for them, but that's just the side effect of them not being printed very often. So because I did in fact get the decks in, at least, you know, everything except the Faceless Menace Precon, I wanted to go through and see which all cards would make their way into the deck versus which cards would end up having to make their way out of the deck. Everything shown here is something that didn't end up getting used for the deck. Now, this is sometimes because they're just not in the colors of the deck. Kadena's a Sultai deck, so of course red and white can't be used, but some of these just do not belong specifically in Kadena's deck. There's a lot of land-centered synergies that are in the Zimone deck that are absolutely wonderful in that Precon because she is a landfall commander, but Kadena doesn't care about those synergies. And there are a lot of mana rocks in here and a bunch of really, really terrible lands that we just don't need to be using in this deck. And those terrible lands, some of them are perfectly fine in Zimone, but in Kadena, we just do not require them. So shown here is my actual Kadena deck. These are the cards that did end up making their way into the deck. And there's my fun 3D printed box because I have another video I'll show you about card storage and shorting. But here are the cards that ultimately ended up making their way into the deck. Of course, Zimone made her way in, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth. And you'll notice that a lot of these aren't the printings that came in the original Precon. That's because, of course, I was not able to get the original Precon. That is in the mail still. So this is what I'm having to make do with. But there's plenty of things from all 3 Precons that together will end up making this a very, very coherent deck. Now, the strategy for Kadena is very simple. Play things face down and generate advantage. But there are some criticisms of the deck that I have heard from people in the past. And these are not criticisms specifically to Kadena as the way I've built it. These are criticisms of Kadena as a deck as people have fought it before. It ends up being a dirtle engine. Lots of value, very few ways to end the game. So let's try to focus when building this deck on making sure that we have lots of ways to close out the game along with our value and control engines, so we're not just monopolizing everybody's time while they watch us dirtle with our trading cards. Now, while obviously some of the cards that do not make their way in are things like Welcoming Vampire and Neheb because they don't fit our color theme, we also need to make sure that things from even the original Faceless Menace that simply do not work with what we are trying to do not make their way in either. So Apex Altasaur is one of those cards from the original deck that I simply don't understand what it's doing in here. Like, yes, obviously we can manifest this and then hit our opponents and flip it up at the last second, and then suddenly it's a removal spell, kind of, sort of, but this deck does not easily flip cards face up that do not already have the morph mechanic, so I don't think things like this need to make their way in. The Zimone deck had some pretty powerful cards like AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait and Scoots Worm, and even World Spine Worm, which again fill in the same kind of role as the Apex Altasaur. Fun things to flip up at the last second when your opponent is least expecting it. But again, these are cards that really do not belong in Kadena, because without the ability for us to flip them up on our own, these end up being just 2-2 burgers for a good portion of the game, in my opinion. We are also not going to be bringing in the alternate commander, Volrath the Shape Stealer. While he does have a really neat ability of distributing counters and becoming a copy of anything that he throws counters onto, this does not really bode well for a face-up, face-down strategy. This is kind of one of the criticisms I've had of Precons for a while now. They are kind of always two decks glued together and they're wearing a skin suit. We will also not be using advantage engines like Rajmi, since Rajmi will not end up working with things that Kadena is trying to do. Kadena wants to cast things that are 3 mana every single time, and Rajmi therefore will never be able to see anything very large off of your flip trigger. It is effectively a draw trigger, but we already get a draw off of Kadena, and making sure that we are hyper-focusing on that is likely where we want to be. A few of these precons contained some nothing morph cards like Thelanite Hermit, and I also want to avoid using these. Yes, they have the morph ability, but if our morph ability does not give us some kind of specific advantage, I would like to cut these things out of the deck. However, this is where we start to encounter a bit of a problem with gluing these decks together. It's really not the greatest problem to have, but we do have a way to circumvent it, and that is the land base. You see, these 3 precons were printed at very different eras of Magic's development, at least modern Magic the Gathering. The original Kadena deck was printed when precons were still kind of hitting their stride. They had been around as a yearly thing for a while, but until we started seeing the vast amount of precons that we have today, the mana bases from these older precons were just kind of awful. These are mana bases that have things like Foul Orchard and Golgari Guildgate when they really do not need to have them at all. The only time that I think that you lean on cards like this outside of, if you're a Gates deck, is when you are playing a 2-color deck and you just need a handful of things to help you get there in terms of amount of dual lands. But when you're playing a 3-color deck, you've got access to lots of options and usually don't need these. However, we are going to be gluing just the precons together at first, so we will be limited in this regard. That all said, let's go ahead and get into the deck itself and see what we've been able to come up with. Kadena Slinking Sorcerer is a 3/3 Naga wizard that allows our first face-down creature spell we cast every turn to cost 3 less. And whenever we play a face-down card, we get to draw a card every single time. So our core strategy needs to be about utilizing this advantage engine to our advantage. So there are a couple of big payoffs we are going to be looking to utilize. The first one is going to be Thieving Amalgam. This card allows us to manifest the top card of every opponent's library anytime they enter their upkeep. So we are able to build a massive army and effectively draw 3 extra cards every turn cycle. And of course, we are also going to be running a card called Ghastly Conscription from the original Precon 2. Exiling all creatures from a player's graveyard can be a quick way to turn a reanimation player off, but more often than not, I've actually used this in testing to exile my own cards face down, because I get extra benefit when I flip those cards up if they have morph. Now, we are also going to be getting some big payoffs in the form of Ashaya Soul of the Wild and Trail of Mystery. Now, both of these are cut out of my full power Kadena deck, but in here they do serve the purpose of being fairly low to the ground cards that give us a lot of advantage. Ashaya has some fun synergies with Zimone, but the biggest thing with Ashaya to me is that as long as we have Ashaya out, we get to have a face-down creature that flips up for 5 if it's ever manifested, which is way easier to do than any of our other big boys. And because this creature is a gigantic tree, we are going to be able to use this as a win condition if our opponents choose not to block it. Again, I am choosing not to use any of the other gigantic creatures aside from Ashaya, because they have big associated mana costs that really means we have to have some way to force flip those cards. And we just don't have those, generally speaking, unless we are talking about Recursion Cloudscraper. This card can flip itself up for 9, and I'm choosing to use it because it does at least have the morph tag so that we can throw it face down and draw a card with Kadena, even if it ends up just being a nothing 2/2 later in the game. But we are running a lot of other face-up, face-down synergies, so let's go into some of the big ones real quick. We have Panoptic Projector, which lets us get a second version of our commander's ability to discount our face-down spells, and if we flip up a card that is face-down, we get 2 copies of its triggered ability. Ugin's Mastery allows us to get an extra 2/2 creature face-down every single time that we cast a colorless spell, which of course morphing is a colorless spell, and Scroll of Fate will give us a way to manifest cards in our hand even on our opponent's turn. This will allow us to do fun things like hold up our mana, our opponents try to swing at us, we tap Scroll of Fate, we throw a Sagu Mauler down, and then flip it up at the last possible second, blocking something. These effects can be really fun and interesting, but we are going to try to avoid being a Dirtle engine. This is one of the reasons why I kept Sagu Mauler in the deck, though, as being a 6/6 trample hexproof means this does put our opponents on a clock, especially when we start threatening putting multiple of these on a board. And speaking of threatening a clock on our opponents, we are going to be running a Print Lifter Ooze, which will give us access to gigantic creatures later in the game. The aforementioned Recursion Cloudscraper, Whisperwood Elemental, which lets us get a giant army very, very quickly with its manifest ability. Curator Beastie, which makes an army at the exact same rate by letting us manifest Dread anytime it attacks. And Experiment 12, which will let us double the power of any of our face-down creatures anytime we flip them up. And Primordial Mist gives us another end of step manifest ability with the ability to also cast cards that we have manifested down if we need to. So if we accidentally manifest, say, our Ugin's Mastery and we don't have the ability to flip it up at any point, then we can just use Primordial Mist and suddenly we will be able to flip that up and utilize it. We're also going to be using Vesuvian Shapeshifter. Of course, it's going to be a free morph, and then at that point, it's a 2-mana clone that can be used to give us extra copies of our Print Lifter Ooze ability, extra beaters, like having a second Sagu Mauler or a second Recursion Cloudscraper. Any of these are perfectly fine to club with the Shapeshifter, especially during the combat step. And finally, we are going to be using Zamone from one of the other precons, because her ability does let us have a very good rate of building up a face down board. Let's also add in a few ways to protect our commander, and let's make sure they are on theme. Sereth the Viper's Fang will give all of our morph creatures death touch when they are swinging, making it harder to block them, making it easier to do things like flip up a surprise Recursion Cloudscraper or an Experiment 12, and a Gift of Doom, which is an indestructible card that we can use by just morphing it onto a creature, or morphing it face down and then flipping it up. Because we can sacrifice a creature in order to use its flip up ability, we can get some fun draw out of this with the card I'll talk about later, and because it's giving death touch and indestructible, it makes it a really good combat trick, and we can just sacrifice a manifested card we don't need. Like if you manifest a land face down and you don't have much use for it, this is a great way to utilize that card. Let's also have some recursion engines in the deck with Eudora Grave Gardener, so that if one of our creatures die, they can just become a face-down forest land, and if they are a face-down forest land and they have morph, we can just flip them back up with their own ability. Dent Protector flips up and lets us get any card out of our graveyard back to our hand, and the Death Mist Raptor can put itself face down from the graveyard if we ever morph. Just think of this as an extension to the extra draw ability that you are getting with the commander, and if you ever morph this card, it does have Death Touch, so you can use it to surprise remove anything out of the board. That all said, we are not done. Those are the core of our strategy, but we do need to talk about drawing cards so that we can have enough cards to play the deck. Now, in our draw package, we are going to be running lots of cards that are from the precons. We don't really have much of a choice here, and some of these are not what I'd really like to use. Like, Lifecraster's Bestiary is okay, but paying a mana every time we morph to get an extra draw, It's not bad, and it's certainly better than what we have anywhere else, but it would be cut from this if we weren't running the Precon. Eureka Moment is another card that is basically built for Zamone. It's a growth spiral that lets you draw an additional card, so growth spiral and divination having a baby, and this is a fantastic card in landfall decks. In here, it is just an extra piece of draw we are having to lean into. But there are cards that are fantastic for this deck no matter what. Glitch Interpreter lets you draw a card if a colorless creature deals combat damage to a player. They Came from the Pipes is an extra version of our commander's own ability, and it also manifests Dread twice when it comes out. Beast Whisperer draws us a card anytime we cast a creature spell, and of course, we are casting colorless free creature spells with Kadena. Toski, Bearer of Secrets, is another combat draw card that I think is fantastic. Aran Frostfang is the best version of combat draw we can have across 3 Precons, since it also gives us the ability to get Death Touch on our attacking creatures, making it less likely people are going to want to block this card. And Secret Plans will let us draw cards anytime one of our permanents is flipped face up, though never forget that the most consistent draw power we'll have in the deck is Kadena Slinking Sorcerer themselves. Now, for the removal and interaction package, we are going to be running some honestly, the more I think about it, really good cards. Across all the Precons, there's actually a pretty substantial removal package you can glue together. Of course, Skin Thinner is in the original deck, and it's a 5-mana removal spell, but it is a morph spell, so it is removal and also draw. And I do actually use this in the full power version of the deck. I do end up enjoying this guy very, very much. Anox Survivalist has Megamorph, and when it flips up, it blows up an artifact or enchantment. So does the Nantuko Vigilante. Slumgar Assassin flips up and blows up a small creature. The Ice Feather Aven will bounce a creature to its owner's hand, which has some really good synergies if we are using the Chrome Shell Crab. We flip it up, exchange control of 2 cards, and then, of course, we can get the crab back using our Ice Feather Aven. Karo's Spell Snatcher can yank a spell on the stack, and that will immediately give us access to that spell on our own turn. Willbender is a deflecting swat that gets to exist face down. Kadena's Silencer is a stifle for an entire stack of abilities that we get to flip face down, and Stratus Dancer can counter any instant or sorcery spell whenever we flip it up, so it is a negate we get to throw face down. We get to run a bog standard counter spell, a sudden substitution as another way to yank spells away from our opponents, and a Beast Within as a generic catch-all way to get rid of any permanent that we simply do not like. Let's also run a Temur War Shaman, since this version of the deck is running a few big creatures that we can flip up and gain extra power whenever we do so. So Temur War Shaman sees a creature flip up, it's allowed to fight any creature our opponents control. That works out really well in our favor, since we have things like Corrosion Cloud Scraper that we can flip up and utilize. It ends up having a pretty robust removal package when you glue these decks together, though a lot of the heavy lifting is, of course, being done by the original Faceless Menace Precon. Let's also keep all of the board wipes from the original Precon in here. Ixodron to flip all of our opponent's cards face down, which can really paralyze a lot of strategies. Bane of the Living, which is just a toxic deluge that you have to sink a lot of mana into that allows us to get rid of indestructibles while we are board wiping. And 1,000 Winds, which I like to see as a board wipe, but in my testing has more often been an aetherized combat trick where people have tried to attack us and we've just gone, nope, throw them all away. That's what you get for attacking me. So yeah, these are the board wipes, and the deck has a pretty decent removal package, all things considered. That said, we do need to talk about ramp and mana so that we can actually play some of our spells later. And some of these creatures, flipping them face up is going to cost a bit, so let's talk about that. So by and large, with my testing, I have found that 1 and 2 mana ramp is more important for Kadena than anything else. This is because your ideal first 2 turns are setting up for a turn 3 Kadena play and then immediately morphing to start generating advantage. This puts you out early enough so that you can start generating your cards so that you can replace Kadena when it inevitably dies. After you've played with this deck a couple of times, players will start removing Kadena because of the sheer amount of card advantage you get, so you want to make sure it comes out as fast as possible. Trail of Mystery is in here. It's not really ramp, it is a holdover from the original Precon and also the Zamone Precon. I'm going to be honest, I don't actually use it too much in the full power version of the deck, though. Overgrown Zealot is a great card in its own right, being a 2-mana dork that can tap for 2 to flip things up. And then we have the 2-mana ramp pieces of Growth Spiral and Explore, drawing and ramping. The 3-mana ramp piece of Cultivate, just because we are limited with what we have access to in all of these decks. It is a fine card in most situations, but in this deck, it's actually less powerful than others because it doesn't get the commander out earlier on curve. Then we have 3 Visits and Nature's Lore and Farseeks, the trifecta of best in slot green ramp spells. And then we have Sakura Tribe Elder, a great green ramp spell in its own right, with Wild Growth and Arcane Signet. And I'm not using Soul Ring because even in decks where I have access to the Soul Ring, I've just started taking Soul Ring out. I do not like the kinds of games that Soul Ring leads to, so I have chosen, even in this deck, not to run Soul Ring. Though if you wanted to do the same experiment and glue these decks together, then you would just cut the Cultivate and swap in the Soul Ring for that. It does technically get you to Kadena at the turn rate that I want, but still just not a fan. Between the decks, we actually don't have to run that many basic lands. We get to run 2 swamps, 4 islands, and 7 forests. 13 basic lands. Across the decks, we really only have 2 good Dimir lands. We have Darkwater Catacombs and Sunken Hollow. We will be using them, and we aren't going to be running too many more of these because one of the downsides of using the Dimir land specifically is that our entire ramp package, sans 1 card, is green. So our early mana really wants to be green. So if we have to take the hit of a tapped land, let's go ahead and make sure that tapped land is a green land. As a result, we are running the Jungle Hollow, Golgari Guildgate, and the Foul Orchard from the Kadena Precon. It also came with a Llanowar Waste, so at least we have 1 good land in that package. Now, thankfully, Zimone was a Simic deck, so we get access to a lot of good lands from the Zimone Precon. We get a Temple of Mystery, which I would have liked to at least have had in the Kadena Precon, but of course, it's not there. That's fine, though. We are here. We are doing what we are doing. But for our untapped lands, we get an Overflowing Basin, a Vineglimmer Snarl, a Hinterland Harbor, and a Flooded Grove. All of these are fantastic lands, and it even came with the Tangled Islet, which we can search out with the Nature's Lores and the Farseeks that are in the deck. Honestly, great selections here. For our fetching lands, of course, Kadena came with Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse and a Myriad Landscape and an Ash Barrens. So we are going to be using all of those to give us the best access to our colors. Kadena also came with Opulent Palace, Exotic Orchard, and Command Tower, so these will be our Omni lands. Across the decks, we were able to get 2 utility lands in Branch of Vitu-Ghazi and Zoetic Cavern, and we are also going to be running some other utility lands from the decks. Kadena came with a Bojuka Bog and a Reliquary Tower. A Mosswort Bridge came in the Kaust deck. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods and Thespian Stage also came in the Kadena deck, and we are going to be utilizing these as well. Thespian Stage is honestly a card that gets swapped out for something else later, but being able to drop it down and let it become a copy of, say, Reliquary Tower or a Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, or hell, remember, Thespian Stage becomes a copy of any target land. You can use this to become a copy of an opponent's 3-tree city, or Nykthos, or a Cabal Coffers, anything that your opponents have down. The stronger your opponent's decks, the stronger Thespian Stage can become, even if you have no internal synergies with the card. That all said, that does it for our mana package. Let's go ahead and play the deck and see how it feels before we get into the finale. Now, I have found in my testing that it is super important to have access to a ramp spell as early as possible, and in an ideal world, that ramp spell should be able to get you whatever colors you are missing in your deck. So here's a hand that looks great if we were playing a different version, a more powerful version of the deck. Nature's Lore being in here would be fantastic if we had a Haunted Mire to grab, but since we don't, this hand has 4 lands, which is fine. One of them's Mosswort Bridge, the best turn 1 land we could possibly drop, but we are missing black mana. And since our deck only contains 8 sources of black mana that are not Omni lands or fetching lands, we don't have what we need with this opener. I mulliganed once to see what I have, and of course, I have the same kind of setup. I have 4 lands, I have 2 ramp spells this time, and a Primordial Mists. And while I am very happy with this hand, it does have a significant problem. It has no morph creature, so I don't get to play the ideal opening play. The ideal hand is 1 ramp spell, 3 lands, and 1 card that can morph. We will end up running with this hand, though, because mulliganing down to 6 off of a hand that is just 1 card away, and a hand that has a Primordial Mist we get to play on turn 4, it just feels kind of bad not to utilize this hand while we have it. So let's open up, draw our first card, play the Opulent Palace, and pass to our opponents. We then draw our next card. It's an Exotic Orchard. Let's go ahead and play it, tap out, and then let's use the Farseek. Now, Farseek can grab either the Tangled Islet or the Sunken Hollow out of our deck. I think we need to use it in order to grab the Sunken Hollow, so let's go ahead and grab that. Now, we are on the next turn, and the reason I wanted Farseek to grab the Sunken Hollow is because I wanted to make sure that the Tangled Islet would still be inside the deck for us to grab with our Nature's Lord that is already in our hand. We want to sequence our cards so that we get all the best lands out of our deck on the curves that we want. So, Farseek does force the card to come into play tapped, so we are going to go ahead and cast it as early as possible. Let's go ahead and tap out and play Kadena. No morph was drawn yet, which does kind of suck, but it's not the worst thing in the world. We pass to our opponents and hope for the best. Next turn, we draw another island. I'm not super thrilled with getting mana clumped, so let's go ahead and tap out, play the Primordial Mists, and at the beginning of our end step, we will be able to manifest this card face down. This will draw us an instant card at the end of our turn. It's a Lifecrafters Bestiary. That will be a fantastic catch-up spell if, in fact, we can find another card. We need a morph card really badly. And we finally draw one. On turn 5, we get a Gift of Doom. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to try to catch up to our opponents who have definitely gotten ahead of us here. We are going to pay 2, and we're going to use the Nature's Lore, and we are going to get that Tangled Islet out of the deck. We're getting it out of the deck right now because we don't want to draw it later and be forced to have a tapped land available as our only thing. We're going to go ahead and tap 3 and play the Lifecrafters Bestiary. And now, whenever we morph the Gift of Doom face down, we are going to tap 1 since we casted a creature spell, and we'll draw 1 card from Kadena and 1 card from the Lifecrafters Bestiary, and as we end the turn, the Primordial Mist will flip a creature down, drawing us another card. So we have a board state available. We don't have a win con out yet, but we do have one in our hand with a Shia, and maybe that's what we're going to end up leaning on in the following turn. We move on to turn 6, and we draw They Came from the Pipes. Now, we are about to hit the butt end of a giant criticism of this deck as it exists, because we have engines on board, the ability to dirtle a lot, but not the ability to close out the game. So let's go ahead and start by paying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's go ahead and play the They Came from the Pipes so that we can see what we are going to get to draw. We get to Manifest Dread. So we see we have a Growth Spiral and a Thespian Stage. One of these is a permanent, so I'd like to have the Thespian Stage available. We throw that out, and then we Manifest Dread once more. The Temur War Shaman is a permanent that has the most text on it out of the 2, so we choose to keep that. Kadena sees 2 creatures hit the board. We get to draw 2 cards. They Came from the Pipe sees 2 creatures hit the board, so we get to draw 2 cards. We still have not drawn a morph creature, though, and this is where we start to run into an issue that the deck can have. With no morph creature, we need to make do in a different way. So let's play Command Tower and tap 3 and get the Scroll of Fate on the board. Now we can manifest any card from our hand onto the battlefield. And let's choose a Shia. We're going to use this in a following turn when we do a big swing out. We are choosing not to swing out in the earlier turns because we want to go ahead and basically play magical hats on our opponent. We want to make sure that we are swinging with a bunch of creatures and they don't know who to block. So we've played a Shia down, drawing us 2 cards. We still have a ton of lands in our hand, but it's not the end of the world. As we hit our end phase, we are going to manifest 2 cards, and between these, I'd like the Sereth Viper's Fang more than the Panoptic Projector, solely because we can draw cards with it. So we are going to draw 2 cards from that. There are 2 morph creatures, and let's go ahead and throw away any cards we do not currently need. Basically, all of the lands we've been flooded with. As we move on to turn 7, let's go ahead and manifest something from our hand onto the board. Looking at our setup right now, the best thing we could drop down is the Sagu Mauler, because it's the thing we will least be upset about if it goes away. We draw 2 cards from playing the Sagu Mauler. Let's go ahead and play an untapped land down. And now let's go ahead and pay 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 4 mana, and we are going to flip up Sereth the Viper's Fang. This is going to show our opponents that once we swing out with everything, they all have Death Touch, making it very unlikely that our opponents are going to block this. So, an opponent sees an army of 6 creatures. They say, oh, I'm taking 12 damage. That sucks. And you say, no, I am going to pay 5 mana, and I am going to flip up a Shaya because it was manifested. By flipping up a Shaya, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I have 17 lands on the board because a Shaya turns all my non-token creatures into forests. So a Shaya is going to be punching our opponents for 18 damage. I forgot to actually count Kadena originally. So yeah, an opponent's taking 18 from a Shaya and is taking 28 damage total. That is likely lethal on turn 7 to 1 player if they've been using shocks and fetch lands, or if they've just taken any collateral damage. There's an aristocrats player at the table. Either way, somebody is dead, and now people really need to kill our board. And the most likely thing they're going to get rid of is that Shaya. So let's assume that goes away. Remember, at the end of the turn, though, we did get a chance to manifest a card down, which draws us 2 additional cards, meaning we can throw away extra things in our hand we simply do not need. We're going to keep the Evolving Wilds. There's a play we can use it for later if need be. So now we move on to turn 8. Our opponents know our battle plan now. They know the power that we wield, so it is more likely they are going to just take the blocks if necessary. So let's go ahead and make things even more difficult for our opponents. Let's go ahead and do our first morph of the turn. Zoetic Caverns goes down. We get to draw a couple additional cards. Let's tap the Scroll of Fate, and let's manifest Bane of the Living down, which will, of course, draw us 2 additional cards. Ooh, we have Experiment 12. So what we can do with Experiment 12, interesting. We can pay 1, 2, 3, 4 and play Ugin's Mastery, and then 1, 2, 3, and we can morph Experiment 12 down, which will, of course, draw us a card when it touches the battlefield, but Ugin's Mastery sees that and manifests a new card face down, drawing us 4 cards. So we've already played... Have we played the land for turn? I'm pretty sure we did. We're on turn 8, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, we did not play our land for the turn. So let's go ahead and play our forest. Now, all of our creatures are, in fact, able to tap for mana. And we have Experiment 12 down. So here's what we want to do. We want to swing at our opponents with only our creatures that when they flip up, they will do things. So the Bane of the Living cannot swing, as we just dropped it down. Hinterland Harbor and Experiment 12 and Zoetic Cavern can't attack because we just dropped them down. Let's go ahead and use... We swing with these 2 creatures and can't do the Arcane Signet. Yeah, we're swinging with these 2 creatures. Swinging with these 2 creatures, yep, we'll automatically flip up one of our creatures thanks to Ugin's Mastery. So we're flipping up Experiment 12. Now they have a choice. Block the 2/2 or see what happens. And if they choose to block the Sagu Mauler, that's fine, because we're going to pay 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will flip up the Sagu Mauler, and now suddenly there's a 12/12 on the board with Death Touch and Trample. So it is going to trample through and deal 11 damage to a player no matter what. I would honestly love if we had the ability to do a little bit more here, but we can't flip up the Temur War Shaman without 6 mana available, and all of these cards have summoning sickness as they are creatures. So we have to be okay with this being where we stabilize. And as much as I do like this endscape, you do see kind of the problem the deck runs into. It doesn't have enough ways to close out the game despite building up a giant board state and drawing lots of cards. I think the deck is fun as hell to play, but my opponents might get a little upset at me spinning my wheels. So to fix that problem, let's up the power of the deck so that we can up the mercy factor of the deck. Now, for the full power version of this deck, I've addressed a few problems that I had with the original one. Some I voiced, and some that I did not voice. One of the first ones is I don't like things like Ashaya as our big face-up, face-down way to win. It's really cool and neat and has some fun synergies with Zimone, but ultimately, I'm just not a big fan of a card that has that little to do with the theme of such a unique deck. So instead, we are going to be running Death Begets Life from the Doctor Who Precons. This one allows us to get rid of a player's graveyard twice, which is already really good utility, but we can also put all cards exiled with Death in Heaven onto our battlefield as face-down Cybermen, which we can then flip up with our deck's various force flip-up abilities like Ugin's Mastery. I think this thing does a fantastic job in the full power version of the deck, and it's a way more thematic way to end games. There's also another thing I want to note in the original Precon. It did not have that many ways to deal with enchantments other than a few ways to flip things up. So in our board wipe section, I'm also going to be adding in a Death Begets Life. The original deck had a 1,000 Winds, a Bane of the Living, and an Ixodron, which were great ways to get rid of problematic things on the board. Bane of the Living is a Toxic Deluge, effectively, but I do still like having the ability to just play a sweeper from the hand, and the new Sultai Sweeper Death Begets Life is not only greatly thematic, given that Tarkir is a place that got a lot of new morph mechanics, but the fact that this draws us a card for every permanent we blow up between the creatures and the enchantments means that we can get one of the major drawbacks of board wipes swept under the rug, and that is, yay, I got rid of everything, and now I do nothing. This allows us to draw a fresh clutch after getting rid of everything on the board, allowing us to rebuild much better. Now, there are a couple other issues with the original version of the deck. It drew too many cards, as in, it didn't have a lot to do with the cards it drew. So I've actually skimmed down the draw package a bit and focused only on the best cards in each slot. So we're keeping They Came from the Pipes and Secret Plans, and we're keeping the Orin Frostfang for the Death Touch ability. We are also going to be running a Grim Haruspex for board wipe protection. We flip it up when we're about to get board wiped, and we're going to be throwing in Grazilex Illithid Scholar, meaning we can make our creatures go back into our hand if they get blocked. This lets us reuse our flip up and flip down abilities. Because this deck has so much ability to draw, though, I've added in a Seagate Restoration to let us draw lots of cards and have no maximum hand size afterwards. Normally, I would not be a big fan of this card, but it is an MDFC, so this is effectively a free include in the deck, allowing us to have other slots available for more important cards. Because the commander draws so many cards, trimming down the draw section doesn't hurt us too terribly much. And for the face-up, face-down synergies, we are effectively running the same cards with a few additions, and you can look at the original deck to see what got cut out. But we're running a Become Anonymous. I was running this in the budget version of Kadena. This card gives us the ability to literally use the Magical Hats ability from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which can help us a ton in problematic situations. They are about to get rid of our commander, and we just decide, no, that's not happening, and also we're getting free cards. They decide that a card that we flipped face up needs to have its ability stifled, and we say, okay, cool, we'll redo it again. They're about to swing out for game for us, and we need more blockers. There's so many ways that Become Anonymous works in our favor, and because it draws us 3 cards when we play it if our commander is out, this means that in a myriad of situations, this is just a gain 2 cards on board and also gain 3 cards at hand, a +4 in card advantage over our opponents. It's just a fantastic card for the deck. But speaking of free advantage, let's have some more ways to freely put cards on the battlefield. Vannifar Evolved Enigma can freely cloak cards from our hand. Etrata can freely cloak cards from the top of our opponent's libraries. Karloff Manor had a lot of cards that did stuff like this, and I'm thankful for it for that. Let's also put in a big bombshell in Abhorrent Oculus. This is another much more thematic way to start closing out games than what we were originally doing in the deck. Letting us manifest Dread at the beginning of every opponent's upkeep, it is very likely our opponents are going to get rid of this card as early as possible. They are not going to be super thrilled with that at all, but I think the card does an incredible job at allowing us to have the board state we need to make up for the deck's gimmick effectively. Now, for the protection package, I've added an extra card. While we're keeping Sereth and we're keeping Gift of Doom, I have added a Revitalizing Repast, which is an MDFC, so we can use this in order to protect our commander if need be, and because it's a dual land, it lets us have better mana sequencing early. And speaking of mana sequencing, for the ramp package, again, this is mostly the same, but I've added in a few extra things that the deck really wants. 1 mana and 2 mana ramp are very powerful in this deck, so a Birds of Paradise and a Utopia Sprawl have made their way in, and instead of the Cultivate that was in the original deck, let's go ahead and overwhelm our opponents by playing a Threats around every corner, which will let us manifest Dread, triggering our commander, which gives us the same amount of advantage as the original Cultivate was doing, but it is real cardboard in our hand and not just lands. For our Reanimation and Recursion package, they are again the same, but we have added in MDFCs. Balaged Recovery is in our land package, and Malakir Rebirth is as well, allowing us to have some measure of board wipe protection. We've extended the removal package to a 20-card removal package because having access to every single card in Magic the Gathering now allows us to play a proper control deck. And a few of the additions have been Exit Specialists to give us another way to bounce things when we need to get rid of them, a Void Mage Apprentice giving us access to another face-down creature counter spell. Of course, we are running the MDFCs of Bridgeworks Battle since we have some Death Touchers, Fell the Profane, and Hagra Mauling as our murder cards, and let's have another face-down card that can counter spells in Void Mage Prodigy. Let's also add in Silent Spectre so that we have a way to start attacking our opponent's hand as well. And of course, it lets us bump up the amount of morphers in the deck so we can sculpt better hands early. Ugin, Eye of the Storm is probably the most expensive upgrade you can throw in the deck, but it does so much work. When you cast it, you get rid of a card on the board, so it's a 7-mana colorless card that allows us to get rid of something on an opponent's board, no matter what it is. So it is almost as if this card is another wonderful Magic the Gathering card that I really love, that also costs 7 mana and is colorless and gets rid of almost any problematic cards our opponents have. It's really, really good. And it's no wonder that I am gravitating towards this card so much. But anyway, Ugin has some other fantastic synergies for our deck that I want to go ahead and point out. Casting colorless spells allows us to exile even more permanents from our opponent's boards, and because our commander lets us take even non-creatures and turn them into 2/2s, we always have blockers to keep Ugin, Eye of the Storm alive, and they're blockers that we can flip up at the last second, which can cause our opponents to be really, really disheveled when we use them. Ugin also can let us pay 0 to gain exactly 3 mana, and exactly 3 mana is what you need to morph and disguise and cloak cards, so we are able to extend Ugin's ability to remove cards. When Ugin comes out, if you are playing your cards right, he always removes 3 cards from our opponent's boards. The card when you cast him, your free cast from Kadena, and then another cast from Ugin's +0. And when you don't need the +0, you can still generate the card that you would have drawn from Kadena anyway by just plussing to Ugin. And yeah, there's another effect on Ugin that costs 11. I don't even know how to read that effect. We are never casting that. This thing is here for its passive ability and its passive alone. But as with any full-powered deck, let's get that. You're not in the deck anymore. Sorry, Meteor Golem. You were there for funsies. But as with any deck that is full power, the area that you are going to see the most sculpting is going to be in the mana base. And, well, we only cut 2 basic lands from the original deck. And really, I only felt comfortable cutting those because we aren't running the Trail of Mystery in this version of the deck, so we don't need them as much. Obviously, you could run fewer or more basics if you want, but I've been running the deck with this and it runs perfectly fine, so I'm very happy with what I've got. We are only running 3 kinds of dual lands in every single color here because we need to hit all 3 colors as early as possible. And I've chosen the filter lands because these filters can filter off of uncolored mana, and that is important to me because I am running cards like Branch of Vitu-Ghazi, Zoetic Cavern, and Reliquary Tower, and a lot of morph cards are very, very pip heavy. So cards like Viridescent Bog, Darkwater Catacombs, and Overflowing Basin become way more powerful in a deck like this because now suddenly uncolored mana can be filtered into our pip heavy morph costs, which is very, very necessary for how this deck plays. The other lands, though, are just going to be Shocks and Surveils. Watery Grave, Undercity Sewer, Overgrowing Tomb, Underground Mortuary, Hedge Maze, and Breeding Pool. And the reason we are running all of those is because, well, as a full power deck, we get to run a couple of fetch lands, and we are running just the 3 fetch lands in our deck's color, as well as a Foreboding Landscape. Because if you're running a 3-color deck, you really don't have a reason not to run a Foreboding Landscape. And it even has great synergies with the Overflowing Basin and Viridescent Bogs of the deck, since if we are late in the game, but we still want to have good colored pipped mana, this is a blank land that we can filter with those cards. We can also cycle it if we've got too many lands in our hand, and that's fine. For our Omni lands, we've cut the Exotic Orchard, but we've kept the Command Tower, and we've upgraded the Opulent Palace to a searchable Zagoth Triome. So this or our Surveil lands can be grabbed with our Nature's Lures, Farseeks, and of course our fetch lands. For our utility lands, we actually went a little bit minuscule with them. I didn't use as many utility lands as I thought I would. I kept Mosswort Bridge from the original deck for the free spells. I kept Bajuka Bog because it's just a great way to get rid of problematic cards, and the Branch of Vitu-Ghazi and Zoetic Cavern, they are morphable lands, so they need to stay in. For the lands, I'm also keeping in the Reliquary Tower from the original deck, but instead of the Thespian Stage, I'm just going to go for the full power of Dark Depths. I'm not using Thespian Stage in this deck, though, because honestly, I find that the Thespian Stage Dark Depths combo is a bit overdone, and I really don't want to use it. Instead, I'd rather do something more thematic with this deck and solve the problem of not having win cons by utilizing Dark Depths. So here's what you do. Use any card like Vanifar, or Abhorrent Oculus, or Zamone, or Scroll of Fate, any of these cards, and you've even got more options besides that. Ugin's Mastery can manage this, Growing Dread can manage this, Become Anonymous can manage this. All of these cards can flip a card face down. Once we have a face down Dark Depths, then use Zamone's ability, or Ugin's Mastery's ability, or Etrata Deadly Fugitive's ability. The point is there's a lot of ways to do this to flip up our Dark Depths. Dark Depths, of course, flips up and immediately dies because it does not have any ice counters on it, and once we have it die, then it creates the 2020 Flying Indestructible Merit Lodge, which is one of the win cons in this deck. And actually, at my local tournament this Saturday, this is the win con I utilized against one of the players I had not seen at my tables before. He sat down with a MagicCon Vegas mat, and we had a great conversation about him meeting the Prof and Gavin Verhey. Shit was great. But being able to get one of the deck's first tournament wins with a Merit Lodge of all things that I had put in the deck on a whim felt super good and way more thematic than doing the Thespian Stage combo. I really like leaning into theme while trying to keep a good idea of what power the deck is still able to pump out. And that's why the full power version of the deck looks the way it does. It's really only a few cards different than the glued together version of the original deck, but the few cards we've added have helped sculpt the deck into something much more powerful. As a bonus, I wanted to do a quick playtest to show you how much easier it is to get the hands you want in this deck. I didn't restart or mulligan or anything here. This is just the first hand the deck got, and it's 2 lands and a 3 visits. In the original deck, that wouldn't really be a capable hand because it relies so heavily on top decking another land. But in this deck, we not only have access to a Surveil, allowing us to dig a little deeper in our deck, but we have Seagate Restoration, so we can just drop that down as a land early without having to worry too much. If we don't draw a land, which we didn't, we just played the Bajuka Bog down early, which isn't the greatest, but we're not in a bad spot. We get to draw again, playing a forest, tapping the forest, put a wild growth on the Bojuka Bog, tap the Bojuka Bog, 3 visits, go into our library, and we want to make sure that we can draw a real land next if possible. And we have access to all but blue, so the Nature's Lure needs to be grabbing us our Hedge Maze. We grab our Hedge Maze out of the deck, shuffle it up, and then look at the top card of our deck, and it is a Dark Depths. As much as I'd like to keep Dark Depths, it doesn't work with what we're doing. So, but it's so hard. I'm going to actually keep it, because we do have an MDFC, so we're not hurting too much. We get to draw the Dark Depths. It's not what I wanted to see, but we are going to go ahead and tap out, play Kadena, and we are going to go ahead and manifest a card, morph a card face down. We morph the Willbender, drawing a card, and because we drew Panoptic Projector, we do unfortunately have to flip our Seagate and just play it down as a land. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep the spell available in my hand, but unfortunately, this is the benefit of MDFCs. When you don't have the lands you need, they do give you the lands you are missing. Moving into turn 4, we have a Threats Around Every Corner, which allows us to get the lands our deck was missing. Let's go ahead and tap out in a way that leaves us the most colors available. Play the Threats Around Every Corner. This will let us manifest Dread. Let's go ahead and keep Etrata because she is the best card out of those two, and then we get to search our library for a basic land. Now we have one more chance to dig for a land that we can play untapped, so let's go ahead and put Experiment 12 down. Experiment 12 coming down will draw us another card. It's a Rampant Growth, which unfortunately doesn't give us what we need. But because a face-down permanent did enter our battlefield, let's go ahead and grab the other Swamp out of the deck and have that available. It's turn 4, and we have plenty of lands, but there is a better way we could have sequenced if we had access to another land. We don't have it right now, so we are just having to work with what we've got. Drawing into our next card, we have a Death Mist Raptor, and it's unlikely that we need to flip anything up this early in the game. But because we have Etrata, we do have half of our Dark Depths ability. So why don't we go ahead and start leaning heavily into that? Let's put our Dark Raptor down, drawing us a card and allowing us to go into our library and grab a island out of the deck, putting us in an okay spot. We still don't have our land for the turn, so we're going to go ahead and tap 1, 2, 3, 4 and play the Panoptic Projector. Tap it so we can put the Stratus Dancer down. The Stratus Dancer draws us a card, and we get to go into our library and grab a forest and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Now, unfortunately, the land we drew is our Zoetic Caverns, which is not what we were trying to do. So we are just going to have to tap out, keeping us with one... Yeah, we have 1 black mana floating, and we're going to play Growing Dread for the one last chance of getting the green mana that we want. Though, remember, we are lowering the chance of us getting that card every single time. The Growing Dread sees us having a Cyber Conversion and an Oran Frostfang. Let's get rid of the Cyber Conversion, and let's throw the Oran Frostfang face down to draw an additional card. And once again, we did not hit the land. But at least I feel like I'm hyper-focusing on that land now because the Threats Around Every Corner has allowed us to get a ton of lands out of our deck. This is our turn 5. Our turn 5, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I guess we just play the Zoetic Caverns face down. No, we just keep it as it is. We're going to play it face down next turn. As much as I want to play it as my land for turn, it's better to hold it as our draw spell. And because we have Threats Around Every Corner, playing it as a draw spell will still grant us that land we need. So it's not the most pertinent thing in the world. We draw Secret Plans, and now we have access to even more draw. Now is the time where we need to start holding up mana, though. So let's go ahead and play Zoetic Tavern down. Let's, I did not need to draw that card. We flip it down, drawing us a card for the turn, going into our library and getting ourselves a forest out. This is why we still have a high basic land count, even in this version of the deck. And now we get to play an island for turn. So we at least have our land for turn. The most important thing we can do right now is start applying pressure to our opponents without giving up important cards. But there's no way for our opponents to know which cards of ours are important, so we are just going to start swinging in with damn near everything. And the reason we are doing this is so that they don't know which cards we are actively trying to hold up. And if they start blocking, we can flip up a couple of things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can flip up Experiment 12, and now when things hit, they get to do more stuff, which is fantastic. And if they did not block Etrata, then we flip her up. Or if we need the extra toughness, we flip her up. Though at this stage of the game, I think maybe we flip up the Orin Frostfang. No. We just flip up the Experiment 12. It depends on how they block. It's hard to know without seeing how they block. Experiment 12 hits. It's an 8/8. It's going to survive that. And we don't know which ones they did or did not block. So we are just going to have to see how much mana we have to hold up. So Willbender has a morph for 2. And Stratus Dancer has a morph for 2, so we need to hold up 1, 2, 3, 4 mana no matter what. This does mean that we... Oh, but they both need blue mana. So instead of playing Secret Plans, which I'd like to play... Ah, man, that's unfortunate. So we're going to tap the Mirror, put the Seraph down, and draw a card and see if we had a way to flip up Dark Depths. We don't yet. So we still have a pretty decent board state, though. And we can start flipping things up willy-nilly here in a minute. We did draw Death in Heaven, but we are holding up mana so that on our opponent's turn, we can protect our board, both with this Stratus Dancer and with this Willbender. I'd love to play Secret Plans here, but the way we tapped our mana, we did not have the blue and green mana needed to use Secret Plans. And I didn't want to use Rampant Growth here because we don't want to deplete our deck of basic lands. And if we deplete our deck of basic lands, we would just be wasting the Rampant Growth when we can manifest the Rampant Growth at any point. Also, I just realized the Panoptic Projector could not put that down, so that actually is like that. I was reading it as the scroll that manifests. That was my bad. We move into turn 7, the proper turn 7, and we are out of creatures to morph. So instead, we have to just swing out at our opponent. But before we do that, let's tap 1, 2, play our Secret Plans, and then tap 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's tap correctly so that we have access to all the mana we need. Yep, we tap out like that, and we flip up the Orin Frostfang. Now they know that all of our creatures not only are big boys because of our Experiment 12, but, 1, 2, there we go. When they swing, we will get draws. And we're trying to do damage to lethal people. Like, obviously, we're trying to do enough damage to harm our opponents. Also, I just realized with Panoptic Projector, these are actually a little bit bigger. So that is a 6/10 Orin Frostfang. We don't want to be forced to flip anything up if we don't want to. But if we have to, we will. If they do not block Etrata, we are going to flip her up, which will generate some extra power on her, drawing another card because she flipped up, and then drawing a few cards because she hit our opponent. And luckily, we did draw Vanifar. So if we wanted to, when we get to our next turn, let's go ahead and throw away the Rampant Growth. It's just not doing anything for us now. If we wanted to, we can go into our next turn, and we can go ahead and make Merit Lodge. In fact, I think that's what we do, just for funsies, because it's just really funny to Merit Lodge in here. We play Vanifar, and we morph this card face down, drawing us a card, and then if our opponents do not care, when we go to the next turn, or before we go to the next turn, we use Etrata to force flip the Dark Depths, killing it, generating a spooky ookie Merit Lodge token, and now suddenly the Merit Lodge is swinging at our opponents for 20/20. On top of our board of big creatures. Like, we've still got everything we need from the original deck. It's just now the oomph we have behind our attacks is way higher. And I wanted to do this whole section here instead of the usual, you know, here's a couple cards you could upgrade the deck with, because I figured, you know, as fun as it is to give you guys the tools to upgrade your own deck, this is the deck that I've been playing with upgraded for the entire weekend. I've been playing it for 3 days straight, just testing it and testing it at my local game stores. 3 of them to be exact. So since I've been doing that, I'm very, very happy with how this deck has turned out. And I wanted to showcase every version of it to you guys. You've seen the $15 version of the deck that made me want to build the glued together decks, and now you've seen the glued together version of the deck and the full power version of the deck as an upgrade path. But ultimately, play the deck how you want to play. Let me know what you end up coming up with this deck if you end up building it yourself. Let me know in the comment section below. But ultimately, I do just want to thank each and every one of you for watching my videos. And this is a incredibly long one, over and above anything else that I've done on this channel. In terms of what decks I've built here. So if you haven't already, this is just where I'm going to arbitrarily ask to check out my streams. After I'm done with this video, I'm going to be doing a stream, of course, talking about recent events that matter to me. And I do have a channel where I talk about those events just on their own as videos. But if you want to support me financially, I have a Fourth Wall shop and a Patreon shop, and of course I have a Blue Sky that you can check out as well if you would like to see the updates on everything I've been doing. But with all that said, I have to get down to start editing this video together. This is going to be a long one. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and hopefully you've enjoyed this fun experiment of just flipping things up and down for great benefit. As always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Leela Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press, though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.